Normally, if you're disorganized or you have not gone through the internal processes, it'll take a lot of time. And remember, your businesses are still running. So fundraising is not taking place in, in a vacuum. You're still running your business, you're still running around, and you still have to go out, engage these investors. So one of the key things is it actually helps you save time. The second thing is it helps you become more targeted. Remember, we talked about the Acumen story? 240 applicants, only 2 have gotten funding over the 2 years. Why? It could be a factor of many issues, but it could also be a factor of the businesses approaching them. How do you know that Acumen is your target investor? Maybe you're approaching them for a sector they don't invest in, an instrument they don't invest in, or you're not even hitting the key check boxes they require as a minimum criteria. Other than sector, maybe it could be team, it could be track record, it could be history. So it allows you to be more targeted in terms of the investors that you're actually going to engage. Another thing that it helps you is you get to raise the right type of funding and the right amount. As we discussed this morning, you could suffer if you end up raising the wrong type of capital from the wrong investor. You need to understand your business and say critically, if my business is structured this way, this is the money that I need, and this is the instrument that will help me get from point A to B. Because if you don't have that knowledge, what you do is you could have a good business, approach the right investor, and he has options to pursue. But the way he approaches it, it's for his benefit more than yours as a company. So that's important for us to do. So this is basically the process that we will undertake. And what I'll do, I'll just get into this. Slide is a bit busy, but we'll share them with you. Some of this we've already covered. You need to analyze your business and understand what is best suited in terms of capital, what capital structure you're looking at. And there are certain things that we had already talked about. I'm already carrying too much debt. Do I really need more debt? Or I'm a debt-free business. Can I use some of that to fund myself and then get a little bit of equity? So it'll all go to how you want your debt and equity ratios to be. Another thing is growth. We've looked at it. The gazelles, the zebras, the unicorns. Really, what kind of company am I? What is my growth path? What does that strategy look like to get me from point A to the next milestone? And with that in mind, then how do I match this to the funding that I require? If you're embarking on a project that's not going to give you cash flows for a very long time, then it automatically tells you what sort of investors that you're going to reach out for. If, for example, like you said, with a school, you have the aspect of the regular children, and then you have the special needs children. That means there'll always be an aspect of the business that is geared towards social impact. And as we discussed today morning, social impact is not synonymous with lack of profit. You can still run a social impact business. It's just that maybe there are other things that you will be hitting milestones on in addition to profit. But that aspect will already tell you, if I'm looking for a commercial investor, they need to understand that maybe the teacher to student ratio is normally what, 10 to 1 or 10 to 2. But because of the nature of my school and having that special needs aspect, my ratio goes slightly up. The other thing that you need to do is preparing the team and yourself. As a founder, there is the practical preparation. Are my systems in place? Do I have contracts? Do you want to start discussing your contract when you have an investor across the table? Your parents have leased the land to the school. Why aren't they getting a payment? Why can't they get rent? Do you want to have that discussion when the investor is in the room? So getting your systems, preparing yourself mentally. Am I ready to work, especially if it's an equity investor, twice or thrice as hard? Because can you imagine someone telling you, here is 1 shilling, I want you to grow it to 3 shillings. Sounds easy, right? But to grow, there are also costs. There are things you must do to grow that money. And if it took you 10 years to grow from 1 shilling to 3 shillings, imagine compressing that over a 3-5 year period. You're going to work really hard. Are you ready to have someone in the boardroom? You've been the owner, you've been the founder. Someone to ask you, we disagree. Explain to us why you want to go this way. Mentally, are you prepared to be able to answer such questions? Are you ready to be put to task about your own performance within the business? you need to understand what the engagement process is. And we are going to go quickly over some of these processes depending on the capital instrument. So we've already discussed what equity is. Masood covered what the various forms are. So we're going to look at the investor engagement process for private equity and impact funds. So what's the difference between PE, pure PE, and impact? Impact is looking at a social aspect or a social ill that is being sold. And they can either be impact fast, meaning they might accept a very low return in exchange for you achieving a higher impact, or they can be financial fast, meaning there's a certain minimum return they require, but you must still achieve your impact. So very quickly, we need to develop a teaser, and we will be discussing what is a teaser. Basically, a teaser is a very short document that highlights what the investment opportunity is, and we will get into it. And then for impact investors, one of the things they'll want to see early on is how you're achieving impact. How are you relating to environmental, social goals and governance aspects or social development goals? They'll want to see that much earlier. So you'll develop this with a target investor in mind. I can tell you, teasers differ. If you have 5 target investors, that teaser going to those 5 target investors might differ from one to another. Why? Because one will want to focus on a particular aspect. One really wants to focus on team, as you said. Another one wants just to focus on scope, geography. So yes, they are commercial investors, they're in the same area, but the issues that they lay emphasis on is different. Then once you send this, what we call a blind teaser, and this is normally something that is common with advisors, what you're doing is it's a teaser that lays out the opportunity without necessarily giving details of which particular company that is. And we find this is very common, especially with some of the family-owned enterprises, because you don't want your details being circulated around. Then once you get feedback from the investor, your target investors, they'll say, we like this about this opportunity, we are concerned about this opportunity. It also helps you get into your mind, what is this investor keen on? Am I able to meet those initial requirements? The things he's worried about, is it because I have not covered them in the teaser, or is it aspects that I can address, or is it aspects that I know I'm having a problem with? Those are some of the things that you'll do. Then once you do that, you'll have initial meetings with them and execute what we call our non-disclosure agreements, and basically now be able to share with them details with your details, you know, if it's these are my financials, this is my strategy, because you've already established there's an initial interest and they're interested, they want to receive more information. Then we go through what we call the initial screening. You need to understand, you have your process, investors have their own process. Remember, investors, most of the time, it's not their own money they're investing. They have investors at the back. So they have investors that they answer to, and these investors have given them a framework within which they should operate. So by the time someone says, I need to invest in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, it is because he's operating within a framework that he has been given either by the investors or it's part of the fund profile. So you need to understand that investor's process. If you're working with a very short runway, for some reason you're not able to take a long time on the capital raising process. If you say have 6 to 9 months, and you ask the investor, what is your process? They're like, oh, we normally take 8 to 9 months. You see, there's already a mismatch. You will be desperate, you'll be in a hurry, but he has his processes, you know. So it's important to also find out what the investor processes is. They also need to get a green light from their investment committee. In the same way, I guess if you're in a family situation, your spouse cannot just wake up and decide, I'm giving all our money to charity, I have found Jesus, I'm happy. It's not bad to find Jesus, it's good. But there's discussion that needs to be done, right? So in the same way, investors can't on their own volition just say, we like this deal, we are proceeding. The decision-making process is, they normally have what they call an investment committee, and it's represented by other people who are not part of the firm itself. Yes, maybe the team will attend, but they'll have their investor representatives, and another independent people on the investment committee to decide. And what the investment committee does is, we like this deal, but we want you to do the deal within these parameters. So the investor has been given the parameters within which he needs to operate. So as much as you have your own requirements, he also has his. There are certain things he cannot say yes or no to without necessarily going back to his IC. Then there are other things that you need to keep in mind in part of initial screening. Understand what the valuation expectations are. I think my business is worth 10 shillings. The investor thinks, nah, maybe 7. 7 and 10, there's room for negotiation and common ground, right? Deal breakers, your issue is, I want to keep, say, your founder can decide, I still want to be an active part of management. The investors can decide, okay, that's not a big deal, we'll just build management around you. Or your deal breaker could be, we want the special needs aspect. If an investor comes and says, actually, my value creation plan was including getting rid of this because it's not been making money, then already you know you have a problem. So it's important to go through this initially, especially once you've had some discussions, so you know whether or not, are you on the same path, can you negotiate, or are you too far apart, so that you don't end up wasting a lot of processes, a lot of time. And a lot of deals fall between this place of where you're having your discussions and before you start due diligence, mainly because of expectations mapping. You know, some things you didn't understand. Some investors will come and say, we want to be appointing the CFO. You hadn't discussed that earlier, you know. And then you start, and you've already gone quite a bit, and you're like, no, the CFO maybe has always been so and so in our family. He always has to be, you know, things like that. So then you go to due diligence. And what is due diligence? And we'll go into it in detail. It's basically confirmation process and exercise. I'm coming to say, you tell me you have 4 chairs in this room. So I'll send someone to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and he'll confirm. I'm telling you my product is able to change water into wine. I will send the chemist to go and verify that the water can be changed into the wine. So basically, they come through, they send the advisors, and usually this is way after you've had a lot of discussions, you have some expectations, the investor is keen, they're saying they want to do the deal, you've understood the investor, you have a rapport, you like what you're hearing. So what they do is they'll negotiate an exclusivity period and say, look, we are keen, we want to just send in people to come in and confirm that what you're telling us is what is on the ground. And if we're happy and if it meets exactly what you were telling us or is close to, then we can do the deal. So one of the things that is key here is to understand that DD costs are expensive because the investor will bear it as a deal cost.